Hello, everyone, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. As always, I hope you are doing very well today and you are having a fantastic week as well. We, of course, thank you for joining us for this webinar full of information about what to look for when choosing a senior living community. I am joined by the lovely Jasilika Davidson. She is a specialist when it comes to this topic. She is the owner of Assisted Living Locators of West Columbus, Ohio, and she is here to help you navigate all the different types of senior living communities and help you put together that checklist that will hopefully pay off with the perfect senior living community for you or your loved one. We know you'll probably have some questions for Jasilika at the end of her presentation, and we would love for you to be a part of the conversation. In order to do that, just scroll down to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A. You can type your questions out there, and I will be happy to ask or to pass those along to Jasilika at the end of her presentation. As always, remember, you can remain anonymous. Jasilika, it is wonderful to see you again today. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me today. I am honored, to say the least. I just really am honored to be here and be on this platform of Senior Living Live. You've already heard about what I do. I'm a Jasilika Davidson, owner of Assisted Living Locators of West Columbus. I love what I do and I do what I love. And I say that with great passion. So I'm glad that you're here today because I know that navigating senior living options can be overwhelming for families. It's something I work with every single day, hearing and learning families and their stories, and also sharing mine. I've been doing this for about 2 years. Not that that matters, but I just want you to know that and learning this and being overwhelmed and hearing all the terms that you're going to hear and learning about the different types of communities that are available to you and your senior, that you don't ever have to be alone in this process, that you always have someone and a resource available to you. So I'd like to start off by talking about my why. I think it's really important to share how I ended up in this space of senior care. I was raised by my mother, but I also had a godmother whom I absolutely love. Her name is Lena Smith. I affectionately call her Mommy. And Mommy is my why. She was diagnosed with dementia about 5 years ago, and it changed my life forever. And because I know the struggles of learning about senior care and trying to find what are the best options, I knew that I wanted to be in this space of senior care. I knew that I wanted to serve families. I wanted to be a listening ear. I wanted to be a voice and an advocate for them. And so that's how I got here. I arrived in this space. And Mommy right now is actually with my sister, Sean, and she is the caregiver because they've decided ultimately that that's the best way or best place for her to be. So typically families call me when they are overwhelmed and they're trying to figure out, how do I find a senior care community, a community to call home for my loved one? I've noticed in this specific scenario, mom keeps falling. Now, falling is one of the things that happens when mom's at home by herself as you're aging. Some of the things that may happen, you may learn that there's some memory issues. It could be that they're forgetting to eat. It's a lot of different things that you have to consider when you're starting to think about senior living options. So in this particular scenario, the first time mom fell down, you had concerns, but was assured that she was just being clumsy, right? How many of us have tripped over something, just not paying attention to what we're doing? And we just think, this is normal, no big deal, not a problem. But mom falls again. You don't want to be upset with your mom, but you fear that there may be something wrong. And I love how at the beginning of our life, we start with parents parenting us. And then as we start to get older and mom and dad or auntie or grandma, in my case, my godmother, we start to notice changes in them, and then roles reverse. So we become the parents. So we're parenting our parents. So not necessarily the parent, but we are parenting those that we love. You don't want to be upset, but you know that something needs to happen. So you start to brainstorm and try to figure out what exactly is going on here. Is this normal? Is this not normal? So you check around the house and nothing seems to be physically causing mom to fall. You look on the counter and notice mom has stopped taking her medication, which is, something that happens. And you ask mom, and she says she forgot. So those are typically how conversations start with me. During a conversation when families are just trying to figure out where to go, what do I do, how do I get there? And then they reach out, and this is how I help them. So go on the journey with me of senior care. Now, this is a journey again that can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be if you have the right information and the right resources. I always like to start at the beginning. So we talked about the discovery period, and that could be for the caregiver, the daughter, the son, the sister, whomever that is, and you start to notice some changes as it relates to mom or dad. And now you have to have the conversation. So, how do you start that conversation? Because even before looking for a senior care community, I think it's really important to know how to approach the conversation and do your homework before you have the conversation, right? And part of that is noticing, being um, in tuned to what's happening in their lives. Are they forgetful? Are they falling? Are they eating? Are they taking their medication properly and on time? Those are the things that you're watching through observation. Those are really important pieces of the puzzle. So you start with that. Then you let your loved one take the lead. That's a little hard, right? Because you've noticed these things, but maybe they haven't noticed these things. But you need to bring it to their attention and get their buy-in. So you're talking to them in love, but you're also speaking to them from the perspective of, mom, dad, I love you, and I've noticed that these things have started to change, and I want to um, put you, or I'd like to discuss the possibility of you downsizing and no longer being at home and having some extra care and some extra eyes on you. And I'm doing this simply because I love you and I think I care about your well-being. So that's really how you start that conversation. You make it clear that their well-being is your main priority. I know that that's a tough conversation to have. I've spoken with many families who have had to have those difficult conversations with their loved ones, and it's not an easy one, but it's a necessary one for the safety of your senior. This conversation will be different to everyone, as no two cases are the same. And what you're going to find on this journey of learning more about senior care is just like no conversation is the same, no senior is the same, no community is the same. And there are some things that we have to look at to figure out if the community is the best fit for the senior that we love so much. It is important to let your loved one know they are supported and that you are not making their life, you're just trying to make their life easier. But by doing this, we have to stress the safety factor. It's important to stress safety and making sure that they're cared and supported in the proper way. So now getting down to the meat and potatoes, what to look for when you're looking for senior living or choosing senior living. I think the biggest thing right now is to build a checklist. So if you don't have a piece of paper and a pen, you may want to go ahead and grab it because it's important to have it right there in front of you. Take some notes. There's a lot of good information here that you'll need on your journey to finding the right place for mom or dad or for the senior in your life. So first, we have to identify the need. And with the scenario at the very beginning of the presentation, we talked about someone who had a fall, a senior, a mom in that particular situation. Again, it's not always a fall. It could be a memory concern. Maybe cognition is not where it needs to be. It could be that mom or dad is not, is actually being more to themselves than they need to be, and they need the socialization. It could be just a number of things. So think about mom and dad and what is normal and what used to be normal for them, and then notice those changes. Is it time to consider it is time to consider assisted living if your loved one is struggling completing multiple tasks below. So let's think about those. These are what we refer to as activities of daily living. You may hear people say ADLs for short. So it's an acronym, activities of daily living. So if you have a loved one that's having trouble bathing or dressing or toileting or transferring, and that's just the ability to get in and out of the bed by themselves. And they're having problems with continence and being able to control their bowels or feeding. that's when you know that it's time for change. And I know that oftentimes we try to carry the load of being the caregiver and being the daughter and or the son or whatever our role is. And that can happen, but it is definitely something that requires a lot to do. So these are some of the things that you need to do is to identify the needs. So, what is assisted living? So, you're going to hear a lot of different terms: assisted living, independent living, memory care, 55 and older, continuing care. But we have to be, I wouldn't do my job well if I did not define what assisted living is. So, assisted living, by definition, is a type of housing designed for people who need various levels of medical and personal care. Living spaces can be individual rooms, apartments, or shared quarters. The facilities generally provide a home-like setting and are physically designed to promote the residents' independence. Assisted living is not your only option. Know all of your care options, which is the ones that I mentioned earlier: adult, active adult, which is your 55 and older communities, independent living, assisted living, nursing home, and continuing care. So, active adult, what is actually an active adult? So, you're 55 years or older. And then typically the setting for the homes are like houses, townhouses, apartments, condos, sometimes mobile homes. Residents are fully independent. They take care of themselves and their homes. So really, with the 55-year-old and older, when you're thinking about it, you're thinking about someone who, I've been living in the suburbs for a long time. And while I enjoy the suburbs, my children are off to college and I don't want to have the responsibility of maintaining my house. And I'd love to just have a place where everyone in that community is my age and we can socialize and connect as much or as often as we'd like to. This option allows active and able older adults to live on their own, but near each other. Many of these communities offer a range of social, recreational, and educational activities. So then we're talking about independent living. And independent living is, for me, the first step when you actually go into a senior community. Of course, you have your 55 and older, but you have your independent living, and you're still very much independent, doing things yourself. Older adults can rent or buy their own units in one of these places. Meals are often included, typically one meal, not the full breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but usually one meal for independent because they have a full kitchen in their apartment. Housekeeping, laundry, and transportation may be available as well. So that just gives you the freedom to choose if you want to have and pay for extra meals during the course of the day. Or to make your own, so you still have that independence where you can do that. Most residents can take care of this themselves. They don't need help as far as their meal prep is concerned, the bathing, the medication reminder. Typically, those aren't things that you have that seniors need in independent living. So a nursing home setting is more of a skilled setting. It provides services as well as medical care. So typically, that's a higher level of acuity or need that is going to be covered for a nursing home for seniors that need that care. It's staffed 24 hours a day with nurses and other healthcare professionals. Some older adults stay here temporarily. So they may have a part where you have a rehab, and then you may have the part that's specifically for long-term care, and you may have this referred to as LTC or long-term care. This could be to recover from a fall, health condition, or surgery. Other adults may need to stay long-term. This option is for people who need 24 personal and medical care. This type of care often can't be provided at home or in another senior living facility. Medicare and or Medicaid cover some nursing home services. All right, so then we're going to talk about the continuing care communities. And I love these because they feature a variety of residences on a larger campus. Usually there is an entry fee into a continuing care community, and they will have independent living, assisted living, memory care, but then they'd also have the skilled in the nursing home. And what that allows seniors to do is to transition when they need it. So from independent living, and if they need assisted living, so health starts to decline or needs start to increase, then they can go from independent living to assisted living. If you notice a decline in memory and there's a diagnosis, they can go to memory care. And then if they need something higher than that, then you have the nursing, the skilled services that are also available. So those are always great options as well. These communities allow older adults to live in one place for the rest of their lives. I always tell families, when you're looking for communities, you have to think long term, right? So just moving into a community where you can start off at a 55 and older community for sure. But if you're thinking about long term, and this is this is the consideration you'd have to think about is aging in place. And what does that look like? That just means one stop for me. So I can go from independent to assisted living to memory care if I need it. And of course, that's skilled services. Location. So during the discovery period with families that I speak with, typically we're having a heart-to-heart conversation. Again, I'm learning their story. They're sharing, what's important to them. And one of the primary things or the main things that's important is location. Why is location so important? Well, location is important because usually you have a son or a daughter or a niece or a grandchild in close proximity so that if they need to get to you quickly, they have access. So often the objective is simply to remain in the local area or to be close to loved ones. But where facilities are located also make a difference in how they operate due to laws in that area. Size is everything. So this is not a one size fits all solution. Senior care is not, because everyone is different. Everyone has different needs. And so the job is to recognize those needs that the senior has. And so when you're thinking about that, you're thinking about communities, you think about residential homes, which are smaller, intimate homes that more look like a house because that's what they are. They are residential homes. But then you also think about, of course, the assisted and independent, and you think about the staff to resident ratio. That's really important. The social aspect of senior living as well. You have medical models and then you have social models as it relates to senior care. So which one is the best fit for the senior in your life? One of the most common questions we get concerning community size would be the staff to resident ratio. Size can also affect the types of services offered. Larger communities, for instance, may be more willing to offer amenities like movie theaters and swimming pools or aquatics or specialized units for memory care. While the typical assisted living facilities offer dining services, housekeeping, exercise, and wellness programs and medication management support, some provide tailored services based on specific health needs. So we talked about just briefly about the medical model and the social model of care when you're thinking about a senior community. And some of the medical models actually do have assisted living, but they have a nurse that's 24 hours a day. They can offer two-person assist if for some reason someone cannot transfer on their own, or they can use a Hoyer lift. So just being able to understand what that looks like and what the community can offer the senior. So that's really important. And they get this information. So they have the basics, but it's also important that when we're looking at services and you're just making a decision and you've narrowed it down, because we'll talk about the importance of narrowing it down to a couple of candidates. I usually say limit it to about 3 candidates of potential senior care communities. making sure that they have all of the information as it relates to your senior. That could include your medical notes or progress notes if they've been in rehabs, or if they were recently in a hospital. Just keeping everything as transparent as possible and providing them with the necessary medical information so that they have good information to make a decision on whether or not they can handle the care of your loved one. Because believe it or not, there are instances when you love a community. Oh my goodness, you are so in love with this community, but they realize and they recognize that your care is too much for them to manage based on staff and based on what they're licensed for, all of those things. And so you have to make sure that we're being as transparent, we're providing that information so they can make an educated or informed decision as well. Continuing care. Some assisted living facilities are part of a larger continuing care retirement community and allow residents to move from assisted living to skilled nursing facilities if and when they need to. Others may have relationships with other healthcare providers that they refer to once the resident needs exceed what the residents offer or the location offer. Now, the goal is to get in a place where the senior can age in place. And that's not always something that can happen. Continuing care can be a little bit more costly. We talked about briefly the entry fee, and that can be pretty expensive for someone like me, let's be honest. And so you have to plan accordingly. And that's when you start thinking about costs as it relates to that. And speaking of costs, it is important to know what makes sense for your budget. A budget is super important. It's something sometimes families are reluctant to discuss, just simply because it's private information. And I don't know that I want to share this with you, but it's important when you're doing a search for care. So when thinking about that, the lower end, at least in Columbus, so I'm basing the numbers, the data that you see here based on Columbus, Ohio. And depending on the city and state that you're in, say for instance, New York, it may be more expensive. So in Ohio specifically, you may think about $3,000 per month to start off with assisted living. In the middle, it's $5,500 per month, and high $10,000 per month, depending on the community, the amenities, the care. All of those things are things that you take into consideration when you're thinking about it. Most assisted living residents pay for assisted living from their personal resources, so private pay. Oftentimes, they're paying with Social Security, they're paying with pension, maybe they have some money that they inherited, they have coverage provided by long-term care insurance or policy. Sometimes adult children will help with expenses, which is a really big blessing, because I don't think that people realize how much it can be, especially as health starts to decline and the more care that you're going to need. So check with your state Medicaid. Some people prefer spending down. So let me go back to that. There are communities that do offer Medicaid, and we are great that those options are available for those who need it. And some families need to be able to spend down, so they can pay privately for a certain length of time or a certain window of time. It could be between 12 and 24 months. And then after that, they need a community that will allow them to spend down their resources, and then after they've exhausted those resources, that they can have Medicaid, or Medicaid will actually kick in. So that is something, it's not guaranteed once the placement, but that's always important to know as it relates to whether or not a community has that option for you. Culture. That is really an important thing, and getting to know families, and even from the perspective of the caregiver or the son or daughter, the culture of the community is truly, truly, truly important. And you don't get the culture of the community by visiting a website. It's just not something that you're going to do. You can't get the feel of it. You can't see how they interact with their seniors. You can't really understand the activities and the purpose behind each activity, because there's a thought process that goes into all that when you're working with seniors, and working with seniors with memory concerns. Those are things that are well thought out and planned. So you can't really know what it's like to live in an assisted living facility until you do it. visit your potential options first. So create a list. I always say narrow it down to about 3 options. I even do that when I'm working with families, just because I don't want them to be overwhelmed in the sea of senior care communities, because it's a lot of them and it can be overwhelming. Uh, and this is also where you or your loved one is going to live for the foreseeable future. So we're thinking from whatever moment to end of life, right? The moment they enter until end of life is what you're considering. And so in doing that, you want to know how it feels. And you do that by going in and touring those communities, asking questions, writing down the responses to those questions, stopping and asking if we can schedule a time to come back and eat a meal or something that's done prior to you visiting. You can actually schedule it during the tour. I think it's important, especially since you're going to have someone there in assisted living. All meals are typically supplied, free breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so just to get a feel of the community as a whole, it's really important to go there and just feel it and pay attention with your eyes and your ears, all your senses. Are there some smells? Does it smell like it's clean? How are they talking to seniors? Are they talking to them? Are they talking at them? Is it a culture of support? Do they have a lot of social activities? Ask to see a running list of activities for the month. They should have a calendar activities, and some are specific for memory care, others are specific for assisted living, and then also for independent. So wherever your mom or your dad or your senior is going to be, you want to make sure that you get the information specific to them, and you think about long term down the road. If needs change, what does that look like for my senior? So those are important things to consider. All right, the summary. I cannot believe we are here so fast. So really, you just need to start by identifying the needs. So that's through observation of mom, dad, senior at the house, noticing some things. Oftentimes, families will visit their loved ones during the holidays, and that's when they notice that, especially if there's a child that's out of town and they're coming to visit for the holidays, they notice the decline from Thanksgiving to Christmas, or from Christmas to Easter, or from Easter to 4th of July. They start to notice those changes, and that's when they usually call me, right? Because they've noticed that there's a change in mom or dad's health. Location, where do you want them to be? Do you want to bring them to you, or do you want them, if you're living in another state, bring them to you? Or if there are 2 children, do you want them in the middle so that it's an equal distance for everyone to reach mom or dad? Those are things that you have to consider. Size. So when you're thinking about size, you're thinking about staff to resident ratio, but you're also thinking about the size of the community. Do I want something that's more homey, like a residential home? Or do you want one that has a lot of activities, a lot of social gatherings, those types of things that's happening continuously, that it's a larger community, 500 people, but it's constantly going? Services, is it important that for assisted living, you have to think about the medication management, the 3 meals a day, the bathing assistance, maybe getting dressed, the medication management, the activities, outings, because outings are really big in the senior community. So what that looks like is they usually have transportation provided for seniors, and they all sign up and register, and they all go out on the outing for the day. So if that is something that is appealing to your senior, they're really active, they like to go, they love to socialize, they love happy hour, because a lot of us love happy hour, then you want to make sure that those things are being offered. Most importantly, the care, that they can accommodate the care that's needed or that's required. The transitions to higher care, I think we talked about that as we were talking about continuing care retirement communities, or CCRCs. When we're thinking about that, we're thinking about, can we move from independent living to assisted living to memory care if I need it, and then to the nursing home, right? So this is a one-stop shop is really what it is. I want to age in place there. And then we're thinking about the cost, the budget. You can prepare for this in a number of ways. You're thinking about using some of your personal finances. So that could be Social Security, that could be retirement pension, that could be long-term care insurance, your children, or another caregiver can all come together and put money in the pool so that they can make sure that you're getting the care that you need. Do you need to spend down because your resources are limited? It happens, it's okay. But just finding the community that will allow you to spend down is really important. And it can range from 12 months to 24 months, depending on the community, really understanding what their policy is with that, but then also understanding if they can help with the Medicaid process when and if you need it, or if someone else can help with that too. How to pay, that kind of goes back to the cost. There's a lot of different options on how to pay for this senior care. And I forgot to mention veterans benefits. That's really important. I am a veteran myself, so I value any time that those resources are available for me, so it could help me in whatever my need is. And then the culture. The culture you're not going to know until you are able to go and fill this community, go in and see yourself. I just have to stress that you cannot experience the culture of a community by simply going to their website, right? That to me doesn't tell me anything. I think Facebook might be a little bit more clear on the culture, even though it's not the most recommended, just because you kind of see them doing what they do and sharing some of the activities and events that's going on. But really, to get a feel of a community, the best way to do that is to simply go into the community and visit the community, touch and feel and use all your senses, ask all the important questions, all of the hard questions, make sure that they answer, determine if the community is month to month. Most senior communities are month to month, with the exception of the CCRC or continuing care retirement community, because there's that entry fee and the costs at the very beginning is substantial. So that's something that you have to consider as well. All right. So, and if this doesn't work for you, and sometimes it doesn't, and for me, again, families come to me when it's an emergency, when they're overwhelmed, they're trying to do it by themselves, and it's hard. And someone like me specializes in doing this all the time. It's what I say it all the time. I love what I do, and I do what I love because I feel like I was born and created to serve in this capacity. So someone who values family and services, and someone who maybe has walked a mile in your shoes. Thank you.
And there is her contact information. So I would be jotting this down right about now, along with the rest of your checklist. Excellent information today. A lot there, certainly. We'll let you grab a quick drink of water. Jasilika, we do have some questions for you already.
Okay.
And I do love that last point that you made. You made it a couple of times in your presentation about the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you really can't get that feel until you actually step foot inside of a community. And there have been so many people I have talked to. That was the deciding factor, was
Mm-hmm.
how the community felt when they showed up and they were able to see it with their own eyes, feel it, as you said, use all of your
Mm-hmm.
senses.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually, in an effort to do that, we usually tell people, don't wait until there's an emergency. Is that something that you pass along to your clients?
I do. I pass that along a lot, but oftentimes they're already calling me and it's an emergency. And so I can't go back and repeat or reemphasize what they've heard from someone else. Really, what I have to do is just to listen where they are right now and then come up with a solution for them. Because what I know is it doesn't help anyone just to keep nagging, you should have called earlier. What is really important is that you're calling now and that I can help you right now to meet the needs that you and your senior have right now. So while that's important, and if I could have a conversation with people before the whole process, like, I think that what we're learning is that caregivers are going to be more prepared. The seniors, it's almost, I'm not going to say too late, but they hadn't planned for this. We plan for every other part of our lives. We plan for vacations, we plan for having children, we plan for Christmases, we plan for special occasions, but oftentimes we don't plan for senior care. And that's where the problem lies, because now I'm coming and there's this change and no one has anything in writing about what is supposed to happen and how I'm supposed to handle this when mom and dad just don't know. And I don't know because I have my own children that I'm trying to take care of and I have my own life that I'm trying to live. And I don't know what to do.
Yeah, excellent point. Definitely something we want to make sure. Obviously, if you're joining us today, you are doing your due diligence, right? Hopefully, there isn't an emergency, and you're making this checklist, and maybe you are looking at senior living or looking at that for your loved one. So that's what we're here for today. We're trying to give you all the information you can take from this webinar and find that perfect community for you or your loved one. So we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So I do want to go back to, again, in your summary, you mentioned size. And that's a great question from Bonnie. What is a good staff to resident ratio?
Oh my goodness. It just depends on where they're at. You know, memory care, you want it to be where you have more staff and less residents because the needs are greater, right? And I don't have the statistics on that, but you do know that in memory care specifically, or the exact number. So I don't want to speak on, and I should have probably had that. Let me apologize, Bunny, for that in advance. But you want to make sure that in memory care specifically, just because it's a higher level of care that's going to be needed, that you have more staff, like that's going to be attending to that senior. So I'd like to say maybe, I don't want to guess. I cannot remember no, I don't want to guess, but you just want to make sure that that is something that is, I could probably send some information about that, Bunny, but you want to make sure that you have a lot of staff that's available for there, as well as assisted living, not as much because they're still, I mean, I've seen assisted living, they're still very much trying to still live that independent life, but maybe they're incontinent, right? Or maybe they need reminders, so they don't need as many eyes on them. And so it's going to be less in assisted living, but you're going to have the higher need in memory care.
Yeah, and Bonnie, I would suggest sending an email to Jasilika. She did have her information up there. I hope you were able to jot it down. We will pull that up again once more before we wrap up the webinar, just in case you did miss it. And then you can shoot that message again and maybe have a good conversation with Jasilika about this. Great question. And we got some great questions today. I love it. We have such smart and intelligent viewers. I love it.
I love it.
Okay, so the next question comes from Janice. What's the best way to learn about the residential home options in your area? It's hard to find out about these, and that is true.
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. I think that one of the best ways to do that is to speak to someone like me. And this is not to just say, contact Jasilika. I can appreciate it if you do contact me. But the good news is, even though I'm in Ohio, I have franchise owners throughout the United States. And so if you have a specific area that you're looking at, you can reach out to me and we can look at those residential homes. Now, residential homes are very nice and quaint, and you know, you have less residents and it's just, it feels like home, but it can also be very expensive. You know, it's because, you know, you're getting more, you're just having more eyes on you, less people. And so those are things that you have to consider. Not extremely expensive. I think it's more like mid range, but I just want to make sure that that's something that you know. But I'd love to speak with you and share with you and connect you with a franchise owner and just walk you through, just learn your story.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Janice, great question. You don't hear too often about those particular types of residences. So
I know. And they are so good. They are good for the right people. And some people just prefer the socialization, the big, you know, and some people think that just because it's bigger, it's better. And, you know, if it's less expensive and older, it's not good. And that's not true. It's about finding the right community for your loved one with the right budget. And some of those are great. And, you know, it's great for the right person.
Yeah, excellent. The next question, we've got two of them from Lauren. So let's start with the first one. Can you discuss the pros/cons of using home care as a bridging strategy between independent and assisted living?
Yeah, I think that's the pros are that mom and dad can be as independent as they need to as long as they can. be. The cons could be, of course, the additional cost, right? Because you're paying, and you're going to pay for a care level anyway if you do assisted living, because you have tiers of care that's going to be based on an assessment that's done of your senior to determine how much help they need, right? So, depending on how much assistance is needed from home care, it can be very costly. It may be cheaper for you just to go to assisted living. So, those are things that you have to consider when you're looking at the cost.
And Lauren also asks, what are some of the key questions to ask when visiting a facility?
Oh, good question. Good question. You know, I always start the conversation with really telling me I want to learn as much about the community as I can. And so that's the first thing. How long has it been there? How long has the staff been there? Right? Because for me, and this is me as a professional, but it's also me who has a mommy who has dementia. And if ever she decides to, or my sister decides that it's the best place for her to go, this is what I would want to know. How long has the staff been there? Because if the staff is leaving, if the turnover is high, then that sends a message to me that it's not a good place to work, maybe, which means it's not a good place for my mommy to be in, right? But then I also like to know where the different tiers, if it's assisted living, what is the cost and the changes, and what does the first level include, the second level include. I mentioned also the socialization. How active is this community? What are we doing? Is mom and dad going to be left in the room? Is someone else going to pull them out and ask them, not pull, but but ask them to come out and join and socialize? Those are things that are important to me. When I'm looking at a community, of course, the cost. I mean, we talked about the care level. We talked about planning when you're thinking about how much funds do I have and how long will my funds last? And so whether or not Medicaid will be an option if you're starting off paying privately, let me be honest, there are not a lot of communities that will allow private pay first and then you go to Medicaid. So you're not going to have a lot of communities that do that. And so since you don't know a lot of communities that do that, you want to note every time you find one so that you can reference them. You found one, okay, I'm going to these others, and this is not an option for them. And I find another, so you can compare and contrast what they offer. Always, again, pay close attention to how staff is treating the seniors. That's really important to me. There are senior communities, and I have to be honest, that I will not work with because of how I've seen the interaction being. And it's not because, and it gives us all a bad reputation, because I work in this industry because I love to serve. It is my joy. I am passionate about it. I want to treat these seniors and their family just like my family. They're just an extension. I'm an extension of their family in a time when they need me. And so I'm going to do everything and I can to make sure it is a safe place for them. So you want to think about safety. You want to think about what they do if they notice that there's a decline in health for a loved one. So that's when you're thinking about the transition of care. How do you do that? Like, do you just send me a bill and say mom or dad has to pay more money? Or is there an assessment that's done? And how do we navigate that transition?
Excellent. Lauren, great questions. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and keep them coming if you have more. Now, you mentioned the staff and staff turnover, so I'm going to switch over to our chat, and Barbara has a couple of questions. And the first one does ask about staff turnover.
Mhm.
She mentions that this happens a lot.
Mhm.
How do you evaluate staffing and tenure, which often factors in quality of care? How do you do that? How can our viewers do this?
Yeah. Let me just say, I have intimate relationships with the partners that I have within Central Ohio, so in Columbus. So what that means is I'm getting to know my communities. I don't just go to my communities when I have someone that I am touring with, because I go with my families on tours with them. That's just part of what I do as far as the process is concerned. So even outside of doing tours, I pop up and I see and I interact and I learn what's important to them, and I see how they value their employees. And let's just be honest, we're still living in a pandemic, even though some of these mandates have been lifted. And so turnover rate is a little bit different now in a pandemic than it was prior to a pandemic. People sometimes are making more money receiving benefits than they were working a regular job. So that may be the why. So you have to be a little bit more careful and thorough in understanding the dynamics of what's happening in a community now than what you had to do prior to a pandemic. So I'm asking a lot of questions, but I'm really involved. I'm engaged. I also speak with seniors, right? Because the seniors in the community will tell, like they will tell how they're feeling, what they love, what they dislike. All of those things are really important.
Yeah, and another follow-up from Barbara. She says response time to a resident's call out for support can be slow. There are ways a facility can reflect in their reporting that the response time was a bit quicker than maybe perhaps it was.
Mhm.
How can you go about determining if response was good given the reporting that is given, and that can oftentimes maybe be deceiving?
Yeah, I think that you have to think about looking at it at its as a whole. I know that unfortunately, just like with any situation, you have people who call off because there's someone who's sick, right? And if they're sick, then maybe staffing is down, they couldn't get someone to replace. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper and ask the question. And I've actually been in a situation where I've helped a family through this just to kind of address those specific concerns, just to understand what happened and what caused the delay. I think that they've been really transparent and very helpful in shedding some light on things that may have occurred to cause that. But they also have things put in place like, I want to say it's like a flashing light. It notifies people, some type of technology where people know how long, right? The data to go back and reflect on how long it's taking. And then they work to really try to correct that behavior to see and learn. And it's noted what happened and how can we correct this so that this won't happen again.
Yeah, and that is really excellent. All of these points are excellent. This is the really deep dive, right?
Yeah.
Nitty gritty of the information that really matters. And Barbara, I could probably suggest too that when you go on that tour and you talk to some of the people that live there, maybe you can ask them how is that? How is the response time with the care?
Yeah.
That may give you that may be a very telling conversation for you. So
I agree. And they will tell it. They'll tell it. They'll tell you if they liked the meatloaf, if they didn't like the meatloaf. They'll tell if someone didn't show up and they should have shown up. They will tell it. And I think that that's one of the best indicators.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. Very good questions, very good responses, very good answers.
Mm-hmm.
So this comes from Linda. For a CCR community visit, what questions should I ask?
With a CCRC, I think the biggest thing as you're going in, the entry fee, I think you need to understand what that looks like. Some entry fees on the low could be, $50,000. Some could be $150,000. Some could be $250,000. I'd go back to the same questions that I would ask with anything else as it relates to senior care. What does the transition to care look like for my senior? What are the amenities that are offered? What's the care level that is included? Independent, of course, is pretty independent. They can come and go and do it all as they want to. Assisted living, what does that look like? So some of the same questions that you're asking as it relates to assisted living and independent and memory care are the same. It's just different in saying that it's all housed on one campus.
Gotcha. Okay, that answers the question. And again, we are already seeing a lot of follow-ups to your answers. So this is good. That means that everybody is really listening to what you're saying. They're jotting down information they really want to answer. And that's why we're here today, everybody. So we always thank you all for joining us and for being a part of the conversation. A really good question here from Robert. How are you compensated?
That is an excellent question. I mean, listen, I was waiting for someone to ask that question, Robert. So I am glad that you did. My services are absolutely free. And what my job is to learn throughout Central Ohio and my fellow franchise owners to learn in their particular territories, all about the communities throughout their area. And we have contractual agreements with them. I like to call them relationships because I'm a relationship builder, and it just seems so business-like to call it a contract. So we have relationships with those communities. And once the senior is placed in the community, we are paid a referral fee. It's similar to being a real estate agent. So technically, when you're going through and you're purchasing a home and you're at the closing table, at the end of that transaction, the real estate agent is paid a fee, right? For showing you the house and then getting the contract in. That's the same thing that happens with me, except it's about 30 to 90 days after placement.
Perfect. Excellent.
Excellent question.
Yeah. And you're right that, it really who you share company with is so important, because that's your reputation for your company. And what you're doing, and you want the people that are being placed through your services to be happy. Word of mouth is everything, especially for I'd say several generations, my generation too. So I think word of mouth is everything for sure. Let's see. Linda asks, any franchises in Orlando?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we have over 140 franchise owners throughout the United States, and we're still growing. And so I'd love to connect you, Linda, with my information. I'll just go ahead and give you my mobile number, which is 614-347-6140. And then I can connect you to someone. We'll show my email information as well at the end, as mentioned by Melissa. But yes, we do have a franchise owner in Orlando who'd be willing to help you, and it's amazing.
Excellent. Back to Lauren. There was a recent foreclosure of an assisted living facility in our area. How can you check on the financial status of a facility?
I've never checked on the financial status of a facility. So I think that's a great question. I think one of the ways that you can do that is you can ask the community. That's something I feel like, as you are being transparent and you are willing to share personal information, personal data as it relates to your loved one, they should be as transparent. So there's no harm in asking them for that. And there are a lot of different reasons why things happen and things switch hands and things close. And so it's always good to ask that question and to be as informed as you possibly can be.
And when it comes to this and what you do, I'd have to imagine there can be some emotions. It could be an emotional time for the individual who's making the move. So you get to be really close. As you mentioned, they're part of your family, an extension of your family. So going back to Barbara, who had asked the question about call outs and the reporting time, she did follow up by saying, my concern is if a resident falls and is injured and staff doesn't respond for hours. She says her mother has been in a senior living community for 3 years. What can you advise somebody in this particular situation when they don't feel like their loved one is getting the care and the proper time that they should be receiving that care?
Wow. And I'm so sorry, Barbara, that your mom has experienced that. Let me just tell you, I cry with my families. I laugh with my families. I joke with my families. We text, we call, we do all of that stuff. And it's never an easy conversation to have when mom has fallen and the response time is slow. And honestly, I've only had 2 times, and I've been doing this for 2.5 years, with the exception of the time when I used to sit with families when I was in back in South Carolina. And it's never an easy conversation, but it's always a necessary conversation. So I think that you start with your heart, right? This is my mom. I'm not sure what's happening right now. What I understand, because they usually, when mom falls, their job is to also notify you that mom has fallen. And so you want to dive deeper to understand what happened. Was she in the room alone? I mean, just getting a big picture painted in your head, right, of what actually transpired to cause that fall. Was there a rug on the floor? Was she trying to transfer on her own when we knew she needed a 2-person assist and she couldn't wait because she needed to go to the restroom? I mean, understanding the full story of what happens and then getting them to explain how we're going to correct this. Now, sadly, things like this happen, right? Even with the best of care at home, with home care, it happens, but it's the willingness to correct the behavior and to do something more that is important. And if for some reason, right, and my stance is that I love all of the communities. There are some that I recommend more on others because I know the quality of care that they receive. But in in the instance that it's not the best fit for mom, and this is something that I don't know if it happened one time or two times or three times or whatever the case is, the good news is the power is in your hands. And the power is in your hands because you can decide to make the best decision for mom, which would be to remove her from the community and find a community that can do and cover that care that she needs, right? So it's in your hands. The ball is in your court. You can make the decision that's best for mom. So never feel like you have to stay at a community, right? You don't have to stay. I mean, they want you to stay, but if they're not meeting their obligation to you, you have a right to walk away. It's okay because really your priority is your mom.
Great answer. And I hope that that helps, Barbara. I know that this can be tough, and we know these conversations can be tough, to have with your loved ones if pre-placement, if they're looking for senior living, making them, getting that conversation started about, hey, it might be a good time, you might need a little bit more help. You maybe need assisted assistance. So maybe assisted living might be better than living at home, or when they are at a senior living community and you're having these kinds of issues, Barbara. So we understand that there is some emotion involved. And as she said, it's traumatic to move a senior. There's always trade-offs. You have anything to add to that?
I agree. I think it just depends on where they are in their life. Because I've done it, and then I've also recommended that it not be done, right? The awareness of whether or not it's a good move. Like maybe mom and dad are ready to move. I've had seniors who are ready to move, right? So having the conversation with them and how they're feeling about possibly looking at other options, because I'm concerned. It's about having those tough conversations about your safety. And mom, you've fallen like a couple of times, and I just feel like they're not giving the care that we agreed upon. And my priority is you. And it can be traumatic. It's not an easy process. Again, it's a necessary conversation, and sometimes it's necessary to do the move, to do the hard stuff, because right now I'm thinking about what is best for you ultimately. You can make new friends. It might be difficult to start with, but it's something that you can. But I agree that it is traumatic in the sense it can be stressful. I've had families that have done it, and it can be hard, but the truth of the matter is, if she's not getting the care, is it worth keeping her there?
And that's where people like Jasilika come into play. Maybe you put out some feelers and see if there's a better community that could be suited to meet her needs than where she's currently at. So, but it's again starting that conversation, getting it started is the first step. So we hope that this helps, Barbara, and we're so sorry for what you're going through right now. We do hope that it turns around and it does get better for your mom.
Absolutely.
As we start to wind down, we are going to the top of the hour. We are almost there. And Barbara says, thank you. Before we sign off, Jasilika, can you please share with us your email address so that our viewers can jot that down before we wrap up?
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out to invite me here and to be a part of this amazing platform. You know what? I just realized that my email address is not on there, which is kind of not good, but let me go ahead and give you my email address. It is J Davidson. So J, the letter J, Davidson, DAVIDSON at assisted, ASSISTED living, LIVING, locators, LOCATORS.com.
Perfect. And that was the last question that we had. And it is now going to the top of the hour. So we are getting out right on time, everybody. Jasilika, thank you so much for being with us, for being our guest presenter, and for sharing all of the knowledge you have about senior living.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and join you on your platform. It's amazing. And I'm just so appreciative.
We are appreciative of you and your services and your knowledge. And we just thank you so much for the time. So for all of you, we want to thank you too for being a part of the conversation. And just a reminder to everybody here, we did have somebody ask about getting a copy of this. Yes, all of you who are joining us today, you RSVP, you will get an email from the Arbor Company tomorrow with a link to this exact webinar to share with all of your family and your friends. And yes, one more great info. Thank you. So getting some instant feedback here. We love it so much. So look for that in your email tomorrow. This link will be there. Share it with anybody that you think could use a little bit of this knowledge about finding that checklist for that perfect senior living for you or your loved one. In the meantime, if you are interested in checking out some of our past webinars, you can head on over to www.seniorlivinglive.com. All of that content is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We appreciate you all being a part of our conversation today. We appreciate you, Jasilika Davidson, and we will see you all again soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.